He is still the hero, the rebel who has kept his tiny enclave of white supremacy in Africa safe against all the winds of change. But now he faces his hardest task: how to make conciliatory noises to world opinion while keeping the support of those who believe the black man was born to serve. He does it with deceptive skill.
Rhodesia has had a long and a very happy history. I think history proves that going back through the years, we have been one of the happiest countries in the world. One of the countries with the least racial friction in the world, particularly when you consider the composition of the different races in this country. But of course, in the early days, there weren't any very great problems. The politicians and statesmen who were in control in those days conceded this. The problems only really started after the last war with the advent of the United Nations and with the emergence of the African and the Asian countries.
Last week in the sleepy town of Gatuma, the Rhodesian Front was opposed by the breakaway extremist Rhodesia National Party in a by-election. At the Rhodesian Front's party congress, Smith's proposals won by only 11 votes. To the outsider, it was difficult to see what all the fuss was about. White rule or separate development, neither seemed to offer the African much of a look in. The party offices stood side by side, and Albert Mells, Smith's candidate, stood solidly for white supremacy.
Somebody has put it to me that the difference between the Rhodesia Front and the Rhodesia National Party is that the Rhodesia Front believes in majority rule several centuries from now. The Rhodesia National Party believes in it never. Is that an unfair analysis?
Well, that may be an analysis, but I would say no one can pre-write history.
But you certainly don't believe in it for some considerable time.
I certainly do not believe in it in any time that will worry me or any of the generations I can visualize ahead of us, and who can talk in terms of a dozen centuries ahead, I don't know.
But Smith's opponents see his policy as leaving a narrow crack of compromise through which Africans may squeeze. The National Party's candidate, Commander Christopher Phillips, concentrated on the prejudices of poor whites.
For the election. Tell me, Mr. Tyler, have you made up your mind who you're going to vote for?
Well, I was a Rhodesian supporter, but I'm definitely not anymore. But I'm still a bit on the fence. I don't know which way to go until I'm more satisfied.
You just said that you used to be a Rhodesian Front supporter.
Yes.
And so was I. I resigned from the Rhodesian Front when the Whaley Commission report came out because I could see this was what was going to be produced for us soon.
Mm-hmm.
And this was contrary to all my beliefs. So why did you decide not to support the Rhodesian Front?
On the same ground. Exactly the same ground. I want a European government. I don't want a Catholic government.
Well, to many people in England, of course, Ian Smith stands for white rule. I mean, many people in England believe that that's what the row is all about.
No, sir, he's never stood for white rule at all. He is a man who bases his whole theory on, well, it's rather difficult. He calls it merit, and I believe he's been called a meritocrat. Well, of course, this is a childish business, because if a society is based on merit, and I understand that in theory anyway, the American society is based on merit, there is no distinction at all between the races. And therefore, to call it merit is merely selling the goods under a false name. The correct name for meritocracy is integration. And up with that I will not put in Winston's famous words.
Why not, sir?
This is a long story, rather too long for your interview. But we do not approve of miscegenation to start with, people like myself. We feel we have a race. It doesn't matter whether I happen to be a white or an Indian, and every race has its traditions and cultures. And we feel people are entitled to retain these, not to be thrown in to make up a coffee-colored mess, which is what Mr. Ian Smith's results would be.
Would you go closer to South Africa?
Of course. There are very few people in this country who have not got relatives in South Africa. I have, but every man has.
Closer to South Africa and further from Britain?
You have to remember the pioneer column was composed by Cecil John Rhodes very carefully of half men of Afrikaans descent and half of English descent. I think that answers that question.
Smith came to Gatuma to rout his foes. The right-wing rebels were no match for the master of the craft.
Sound easy now looking back. This is one of my problems, ladies and gentlemen, that it seems as though we've done it too easily and people take it for granted and think that there are no problems. And this is one of the biggest mistakes that you can ever make. I want to emphasize that point. There's been a tremendous exercise with incredible complications with the whole of the world against Rhodesia, this little landlocked country. And anybody, I believe, who has any sense and who pauses to think for a minute must realize what a fantastic thing it was that we embarked on, and to think that we have succeeded.
On polling day, Smith had succeeded again. To be seen at the rebel National Party's table was to be something of a social outcast. Smith's man won by a crushing 870 votes to 65. I asked Len Idensohn, ex-Smith supporter and founder of the National Party, if the result showed that the nation did not share his distrust of Smith.
I think that is quite right. The supposition is that. I agree with you. They still are convinced that this is the man that is the saviour of the white man. But they're not even prepared to listen or to reason. You can even show them documents, the white paper showing the acceptance of the Six Principles and so on by Ian Smith. You can talk about events to the north of us and the pitfalls that they've all gone into, but this makes no difference at all to them. They are still, as I say, in this haze of glamour that's been built around this image.
You believe it's going to last?
No, no. You can't. You can't live a lie.
Pat Bashford's New Centre Party is drawing support from businessmen weary of sanctions who see little between Smith and the extremists.
Well, I should say that the difference between these two parties is simply this, that the Rhodesian National Party want apartheid, that is to say white supremacy, finish, and the Rhodesian Front want to keep their options open. They want their cake and they want to eat it. They believe that they could, if they were given half a chance, put off eventual African majority rule for 200 or 300 years, but at the same time they know that this would never ever get world recognition, and Smith is being rather a double talker on this one. He's trying to persuade the people of Rhodesia that he's keeping control in white hands forever and a day, and on the other hand he's trying to keep his options open in the hope that someone will make a settlement with him on this basis.
So in fact, I mean, the right-wing Rhodesian frontiers and the people who've left are quite right to be suspicious of him from their point of view.
They are indeed. They're honest, and Smith isn't.
The extraordinary thing at the moment coming here is that all of a sudden, in world opinion, compared with other people, the Prime Minister emerges as a liberal. I mean, is this true?
Oh, Lord, no. No, Ian Smith's pretty far out on the right, actually. He's as far out on the right as he can get without actually falling off the edge, as Chris Phillips and his friends have done.
I mean, he calls the others racialists.
Ian isn't a racialist, strangely enough. Personally, he isn't a racialist, but he's terrified, and I don't think he's a completely free agent. I think he's completely in the grip of a dedicated band of white supremacists.
Is the Rhodesia Front and Rhodesia going to lurch to the right once again, as it has done successfully?
They can't possibly go any further to the right. If they did, they'd be fascists and done with it.
Sanctions were meant to bring Rhodesia to heel, and so they might have done had it not been for the friendly border with South Africa. But petrol, the modern nation's lifeblood, comes up the track from the south. In Salisbury, there are still more cars than parking meters. The failure to stop the petrol getting through has been the most conspicuous breach of the sanctions policy. Petrol rationing is a formality. No one with the money to buy extra coupons legally need go short. There is a limited choice of goods in the shops, and labels don't always mean what they say. Housewives complain at the lack of real choice and grumble that Rhodesian made is not as yet a hallmark for quality, but drink and cigarettes are cheaper than in Britain. But the economy is by no means as healthy as it appears at first sight. Exports are down, tobacco stocks remain unsold. Sanctions and the long drought have hit many farmers hard. 2 weeks ago, Lord Graham resigned from Smith's government. The right wing looked forward to him joining them, but he has worries of his own down on the farm. Last week he held a cattle sale. The attendance was dismal, and the bidding, despite the enthusiastic auctioneer, slow. His lordship's bulls sold at a loss of about £40 each. Businessmen and farmers are worried. Why are these people so disturbed when a couple of years ago they were solidly behind the Prime Minister?
Yes, I think at that stage they could see the end coming. I believe all the time that they thought a settlement was just round the corner. In fact, the thing is beginning to drag out now. The squeeze is on, and they're not so sanguine.
Are sanctions working, in fact?
They are up to a point, but I wouldn't say they're going to bust us.
At what point are they working?
Well, as far as agriculture is concerned, that's the most obvious point. The tobacco farmers are facing ruin. Let's face it, that's what the position is. They are facing ruin. Their industry cannot survive for very much longer under these conditions.
You're a tobacco farmer. Can you talk personally about how it's affecting you?
I can indeed. It's cut my income in half.
I mean, are you going to get out of it?
Oh my God, no. How can I? I've been here for more than 30 years. I married the daughter of a pioneer who was born here. My children were born here. I've got nowhere to go.
Now, are you going to get out of tobacco farming? I mean, has it got to that point that you may have
well,
to do
we shall carry on with it as long as we can on humanitarian grounds, because it keeps a lot of people busy who would otherwise be out of a job. That is the problem in this country, unemployment. That's our Achilles heel.
Yet one doesn't see much visible signs of unemployment. You don't see dole queues and things like that.
Well, of course you don't. Of course you don't. We don't have that situation here. We're fortunate in some respects in having large tracts of what we call tribal trust land, which is the traditional home of the African people, and they simply disappear and sit in these tribal trust lands. You don't see the queues here, but the underemployment in these areas is mounting the whole time.
There is a plan to tidy up Salisbury's Cecil Square by preventing the unemployed sleeping on the grass. It won't solve the problem, but it will make the place look neater. But not all the unemployed are the illiterate from the bush.
Under the present circumstances, it is very depressing and frustrating indeed, because for the educated African, there is no opportunity in employment. At high level, you take a chap living the local university here with a London degree in LLB or BSc Economics or BA, he can't find any employment at all. Now, this happens when, in fact, you find a white with lower qualifications getting a job that an African who could do it better, who has got a better intelligence, can't get. Now, you get an example of a milkman coming from Britain. He's a poor white in Britain, but he comes here because he's white. He gets a post as director of the Dairy Marketing Board or chairman of the Dairy Marketing Board. The only qualification is that he has been selling milk and he should know something about milk or delivering milk.
To cope with the rising birth rate, the Smith government should produce 40,000 new jobs a year for Africans. Since 1960, the number of Africans in work has fallen by nearly 40,000. The question is, how long will the jobless remain passive?
So you have a growing African unemployment problem. You have a booming African birth rate. Aren't these things going to lead you towards a crisis and a confrontation?
This isn't something which is imminent. You have mentioned a problem which is there, which we recognize. But I don't believe that a confrontation is anything which will worry us for a matter of 6, maybe 10 years. Now, if we can overcome the present economic war and the economy of Rhodesia can once more get into top gear, then there is no reason why we should ever have this confrontation. But at the moment, although I'm pleased to say the economy is expanding, this means we are winning the economic war, because to begin with it was contracting. We have now turned the corner and it is expanding. I can see that it is not expanding as fast as I would like it to.
This is something that worries you, sir?
A little bit, not a great deal, because I'm confident that we will completely overcome the sanctions war.
On the morning of this interview, Mr. James Bottomley, a Commonwealth Office diplomat, arrived in Salisbury. It was all supposed to be most secret, but his fame had preceded him. He was welcomed by the loyal British governor, Sir Humphrey Gibbs, and saw Mr. Smith. Once again, it seems that Britain is offering an olive branch. For Mr. Smith, it could not have come at a better time.
But if, sir, you have to concede parts of the Constitution that you are now agreeing, are you happy that you could carry the Rhodesia Front with you?
I wouldn't accept anything which did not satisfy me and my colleagues in the government. And I have a feeling that if we could accept this, that we would fairly easily take the country with us, my party and the country.
I mean, one of the things that worries some of your right-wing opponents is perhaps that separate development, stage 2, is a negotiable factor, which is, I think, why they want to come in now and not in 5 years' time. Is it negotiable?
Well, as far as I am concerned, at the moment, our constitutional proposals have been put forward honestly in the belief that this is the answer for Rhodesia. And there is no doubt in my mind that if we come to an accommodation with Britain, it won't be along the lines of the constitution that we accepted at our last Congress. But this will be for a different reason. It will be to come to an agreement, to try to get out of this sanctions and economic war, which is to the detriment of Rhodesia in many ways. And so one has got to try to arrive at a balance. I concede that it won't be the same constitution.
So if there is a settlement, the constitution could be changed?
If there is a settlement, you can put your shirt on it that the constitution we agree on will not resemble the constitution which was recently accepted by my party Congress. Of that you may be sure.
Is Mr. Smith preparing to double-cross his own party, or is he window-dressing for world opinion? Mr. Robin James, right-wing rebel MP, was expelled from the Rhodesian front 2 hours after I asked him if he thought the Prime Minister was in a flexible mood and more prepared to make concessions than the rank and file.
Yes, I think that he is far more flexible than the ordinary man in the street in this country, who knows we have independence. It's a matter of indifference, by and large, to the ordinary man in the street, whether it's recognized by Britain or not.
Why is the Prime Minister so anxious for a settlement?
Oh, naturally, we had to increase our gross national product to cater for the expanding African population.
Is he going to be able to carry the Rhodesia front, though, if he does make more concessions than Tiger? If he goes beyond Tiger?
Not more than Tiger, no. He couldn't go back beyond Tiger. It's impossible.
So what's going to happen? I mean, let us just presume that he does. What would
well,
then
this
happen?
is a presumption which I wouldn't care to think that the Prime Minister would possibly accept. I don't think he could. He's a political animal, and he's very astute, and I don't believe he'd go back. Certainly, as far as Tiger, he might use it as a starting point, as he said, but he couldn't go beyond that.
And if he did?
I'm sorry, we'd have a new Prime Minister.
Despite growing pressures, life, if you can stand the boredom, is still good for the Rhodesian whites. A servant can be hired for as little as 3 shillings and 4pence a day, and he would be expected to do a good deal more than pour drinks for the guests around the swimming pool. Yet most white Rhodesians would welcome a settlement, but on their terms. At the Hatfield trotting track on the outskirts of Salisbury, I found few who were prepared to make significant concessions to Britain. They trust Smith to hold the white man's bastion for them.
Do you think there are concessions that Ian Smith and the Rhodesians can make to get a settlement?
Well, I suppose they can, but Ian Smith knows better than me.
Do you think that any part of the new constitution is negotiable?
Well, I think the big thing is there, I haven't actually seen the constitution, so I wouldn't know. But whatever Ian Smith does, that's fine.
If he gave up separate development, you'd be still be happy if he did it.
The thing is, he wouldn't give up separate development, this I'm sure.
Well, I don't know if there's a chance, but I hope there is a chance.
Do you think there's any concessions that Rhodesia can make to get a settlement?
Well, I think Rhodesia's went back as far as she could go.
Yes, I think a very good chance at the moment.
Do you think that there are concessions that Rhodesia can make to get a settlement?
I hope so.
What kind of concessions do you think Rhodesia can make?
Well, I think we have to give the Africans some sort of a future to look forward to.
Do you think they haven't got that at the moment?
Well, a better future, let's put it like that.
Smith is getting very anxious.
I think Smith wants a settlement.
I think he definitely does, yes.
Why?
Well, I think the way things are going, the sanctions and everything, you know, they can't last out very long. I mean, we lasted so long now, and even the people themselves, you know, are beginning to get a bit worried.
Do you want there to be a settlement?
Of course we do. Everybody wants one.
Do you think that there are any concessions that Rhodesia can make to get a settlement?
Oh, well, I don't think so, no. I think we're quite all right as we are.
I mean, it's been said to me, sir, here, while I've been here, that your right-wing opponents say that there should never be black majority rule, while the Rhodesia Front and the Prime Minister says there should be majority rule in perhaps 200 or 300 years.
Well, we don't believe in majority rule. If majority rule means one man, one vote, I certainly don't believe in that. But what I say is, as long as we make merit the criterion, then I don't see any hope of this happening. So there is no need to resort to racial politics and putting people in categories and branding them because of the color of their skin. And if you can avoid this, then why resort to such a provocative thing?
Lord Graham said to me, sir, that he felt that white rule was safe in your lifetime as long as you were Prime Minister. Is that so?
I'm pleased to hear he has that view. I hope he's right.
Do you think it's safe, sir, in your lifetime?
Oh, I'm absolutely convinced that Rhodesia will continue much the same as it is today for my life. But I hope it will be for quite a long time after that. I believe very strongly in having a high merit qualification, a high standard. And this doesn't only apply in a multiracial country such as ours. I think there might be advantages even in your country if you had this sort of thing with due respect.
But sir, doesn't it in the end, doesn't the merit in fact, because of the conditions of the country, come down to white and black and isn't really separate development in more polite word for apartheid?
There is no doubt that at the moment on merit the European is in control and in complete control. But I believe this is on merit, and I think that it must be our aim to retain this on merit. And this, I think, is the guiding principle. If we can do this, we will be successful. Whereas if we've simply got to resort to straight, blatant racial politics, then the position won't be so easy. But it is a fact that the European is a civilizing influence here.
And now looks as if there's a chance of a settlement. Are you optimistic at all about the future then?
No, there is nothing optimistic at all in the future. It appears now Great Britain is going to sell us down the drain. They are initiating talks with the rebel government here, and it means they are going to make concessions, and these concessions will not at all have any bearing on no independence before majority rule. It appears Britain is going to forget about no independence before majority rule, and then the future of the African looks very bleak indeed.
But if there is going to be an agreement, then Smith is also going to have to make concessions, isn't he?
Well, he is going to make settlement. He is going to make concessions. In fact, at the Rhodesian Front Congress, he said, merit was going to be the criterion, and this sells very easily to people in Britain, to all, even countries in Western Europe and America. It sells quite easily. But after the settlement, which will be a paper settlement, the whites in this country, whose attitudes have hardened since 1962, will tear the piece of paper, and we will have had it.
Why are you so sure that Britain is going to sell you down the river?
No, they have brought this world opinion against Rhodesia, but it has never been effective. It has never at all been effective to change the hearts of the whites in this country. In fact, if it has done anything at all, which I am sure people overseas are aware of, it has actually hardened their feeling and made them more determined that the black man in this country will never see the sky.